2. Do y'all want to start right at 5?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's start right at 5. So that's in 25 seconds. This screen in here is about to turn off. I'm curious as to why it's not working.
That's because it's not plugged in.
Oh, okay.
It just hits different.
Do you want to give me a countdown from 5?
Yeah, we're on in 15 seconds.
You want me to count to 5 for you?
It just turned off, so we're good. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Reverend and the Reprobate Live. I'm here with... What? What did you say? We're live now?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome again to... this is the worst part about having a producer is the misfires on the buttons. But we are the Reverend and the Reprobate here with our producer, Colton Templin. Welcome to our Tuesday afternoon show. We're going to try to do this, I think, every Tuesday now, is just doing a little bit of a live spot, talking about a few things that are on our mind and previewing the episode that we've got coming up this week. So let's start with the episode that we have coming up this week. This Thursday, we will be airing our episode where we get to sit down with the very funny Josh Phillips. Josh Phillips told us some absolutely hilarious stories, and there was a lot of stuff we didn't get into. We talked about his relationship with Paula Deen as a large comic who loves fried food. He found himself perusing her buffet on the beach, unbeknownst to the fact that they were shooting behind him one of her shows, which I think is a pretty funny story. He also was a zombie in AMC's The Walking Dead. Mm-hmm. So if you're
familiar
with that show,
he's got a great story with Andrew Lincoln.
Yeah,
who's Rick.
You insisted on calling Andy.
He said
as though you have a personal relationship
Andy.
with the guy.
He said it. He said Andy. I just continued it because I want to have a personal relationship with him. He's so cool. Who doesn't like Rick?
I didn't think he was a great character after season 2.
There's Rick, Daryl.
You think Rick is number 1?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Josh Phillips was awesome. He gives us a bunch of funny stories. So make sure that you're tuned in on Thursday. That episode will go live Thursday on Apple Podcasts, on Facebook, on
and if you happen to
YouTube,
Google Josh,
Spotify, Podchaser, all that stuff. Yeah.
If you happen to Google him ahead of time,
he's the third
He's
one.
not that Josh Phillips.
No, or the other Josh Phillips. He's the third most famous Josh Phillips.
He's not the murderer.
Yeah, because there is a murderer who comes up as number 1. And then number 2 is a country singer.
Yeah.
And they're talking about doing a show together, the Josh Phillips Show, which will have him open with comedy, and then the country artist will come and do his stuff. Because that Josh Phillips is not only much more well-known, but apparently much more well-loved.
I would never say that.
But not by Paula Deen.
Yeah.
No one loves Josh Phillips as much as Paula Deen does. So a couple of things we wanted to talk about today, on this day. And we're going to start off with a spoiler alert. And the reason we're going to start off with a spoiler alert is because if you've been listening to our show, last year we decided that we were going to use Dan Lee's one book a year that he reads for Dune. We were going to make him read the book Dune. It was this 600-page odyssey of a book. And we got to see the movie this past week. So if you haven't seen the movie Dune, then figure it out, right? Sort yourselves out. You've had 10 days to do it. It's on HBO Max. It's at the theaters. I went and saw it at the theaters. You saw it at home whenever it released. Kirsten and I went and saw it in the IMAX. So having finished the book and now seen the movie, what are your thoughts on Dune? Danley, we'll start with you.
Well, I thought it was very true to the book. I think they did a good job bringing the book to life.
Okay, in what way?
The characters, the story. There was a lot of things I wasn't sure if they were going to cut it out or if they would add different scenes. Just in the midst of storytelling, you know how they have to take liberties. They have to change. Ultimately, a 600-page book, you can't in one movie tell all the story.
Right, and yet
so
still,
I wasn't sure what they would do with that.
There were so many things in the previews that didn't make it into the movie. And that was one of the things that I thought was odd. So the one, if you've seen the trailers for Dune, there's this one scene that everybody kind of points out, both the people who are fans of the book and those who had never seen it, that they saw was this kind of charming scene between Duncan Idaho's character, Jason Momoa's character, Duncan Idaho, and Paul Atreides, and that was when they're in the hangar, and Jason Momoa and him are talking, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "You've been training?" And he's like, "Yeah, can you tell?" And he goes, "No." Right? That scene, which is this kind of like funny exchange between the two of them that's in all of the Dune trailers, was not in the movie. The tone that they set between those characters, I thought, was completely different than what they showed in the previews. And because of
That's
that, it
crazy. I
made it a
thought
little
that
different
wasn't-
than it wasn't in the movie. It made it a little different than what we saw in the movie as well. Because when you see their relationship in the book, it is that kind of joking back and forth. They're very close, and that really plays into what we see in the second book, and why Jason Momoa's character Duncan Idaho is so important in the second book. It's just weird that they set that kind of apart from each other. So you liked some of the liberties that they took. What were the things that you didn't like about the movie? Let's start there, because I want to end on a positive, because overall we both liked it.
I don't know that there's anything major that I didn't like.
Okay.
I did not know that it was part 1 and part 2. So
Okay.
I was kind of expecting the full movie, and I was glad to see
Right.
that I've got more Dune coming, essentially, because again, I think it's difficult to adapt that much information, because that's not only is this 600 page, I think you mentioned at the end there's a glossary of just terms.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. There's 2 appendixes.
It's very
and
very
then there's a
complicated.
glossary of just terms. What's up, Courtney Marie Ichter?
Yeah,
She's
hey,
watching
what's up,
right
Courtney?
now.
So I was glad to see that, but it had not been greenlit yet, part 2.
Right.
That was a little troublesome.
It was frustrating.
because now we have to potentially get the green light, which I think everyone assumed once we saw it.
Sure.
Generally, everyone liked it. The thing that I didn't like, that I'm not sure about, is that there's been a lot of comparisons from Dune to the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
And to Star Wars.
Yeah, and we've only gotten part 1.
Right.
So I'm hesitant to give it that title, because I will rewatch Lord of the Rings. I'll rewatch Star Wars. I put Dune on a second time, while I was cleaning the house or whatever.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone back and really just rewatched it.
Okay, so
I need to see the completion of the story.
Yeah,
and then we can talk.
And some of the things that they're comparing it to the Lord of the Rings for have to do, as our friends at Tatooine Sons stated in their latest episode. If you haven't heard it, you should check out Tatooine Sons on both Apple Podcasts and Podchaser. And they're on a new one called Bullhorn FM. They've got a new thing that they're doing, but they did their full review of Dune. And Samuel the Hutt came on, and when he was talking about it, he said one of the reasons he thinks they're getting this comparison to Lord of the Rings so much is the pacing of the story. That there are sometimes when the movie almost looks like it's being shot as like a documentary, because there's these big pullbacks and it shows the expanses of Arrakis. And that's one of the things when we look at the difference between what you can do in a book and what you can do in cinema, that there, the whole idea of a picture paints 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. You sort of had that same kind of thing and feel come to it. Now, one of the areas where the book really, I think, brings the characters to life in a way that they can't do it in the movie is there's so much stuff in the book that happens in the characters' heads.
Yeah.
You see, like, there's these entire pages that are all in italics, because that's what the characters are thinking whenever they're going through, from one thought to another, especially when you look at Paul and Jessica. So Paul Atreides, who's the primary character, and then Jessica, his mother, who's a Bene Gesserit. Everything that they think about and the way that they use their voice and how they try and manipulate people, it's all really, really, really intense. And in the movie, you just see them do it, them say a thing or do a thing or whatever.
Well, in the prophecies, when he sees something in the future,
yeah,
you can bring that to life visually on screen, but you can't get everything that he's worried about. And,
right.
Because he spends a lot of time seeing the jihad that he's gonna end up having.
Do you remember? I wasn't
quick.
scrutinizing the movie for that word, but I don't recall hearing it in the movie. I don't think that they talked about, because in the book it's called a jihad. It's a big holy war that starts because people believe that Paul is this Bene Gesserit Messiah, and so do the people on Arrakis believe that he's kind of their Messiah, and then the Mentats believe that he's their Messiah, and so there's all of these like conflicting parties that are saying that Paul is this godlike leader king, and this jihad happens, and yet it's alluded to over and over, but I think they were very careful not to use that word because it no longer has the connotations that it did back in the 1960s when this book was written. That since then, especially in the last 20 years in the United States, that word has taken on all sorts of like terrible forms. So they were smart to kind of remove that, but there is a lot of stuff that you miss. However, they nailed some things completely spot on. One in particular is you're talking about Paul's visions, the interaction between Paul and Jessica in the tent where he starts screaming at her after he has his first vision, and he says, "You turned me into this, you turned me into a freak." That is exactly how I pictured it, and almost word for word how it shows up in the book. So there's some of these
a lot
things.
of it is how I pictured it.
Oh
too.
my gosh,
Visually,
so
the
good.
cinematography was fantastic.
And Oscar Isaac's character, like how incredible did he nail the Duke of Atreides?
perfect.
It unbelievable. That moment that he has with Paul in the graveyard where he's like, even if you decide not to take on the mantle of the Duke of Atreides, you've been everything that I've ever needed you to be. I've only ever needed you to be my son. I was like, because over and over in the book, Paul remembers that moment whenever he's talking to other people about his dad. And whenever he's thinking about like what the future is going to hold, it all kind of culminates around this voice of his dad that is like the only thing he ever really needed to be was his father's son. And just by doing that, he made him proud versus the rest of the universe, which is kind of pushing him to be this other guy. Thoughts on Baron Harkonnen?
I loved it. He was,
Did you?
Yeah, he was what I pictured he would be.
Okay.
His size, because the book talks about his
massive.
his girth and
Yep.
the I don't remember what it's called, but the
suspensors.
apparatus. Yeah,
the
that.
suspensors. Yep.
That was about what I had pictured.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I thought he would be bigger.
Yeah.
And there was some stuff that they talked about on some behind the scenes things where it said that they couldn't make him bigger because it would have been so hard for the actor to walk around in the suit. Now, most of the time he was in the suit, he was seated. And there's only two real scenes. If you're a parent and you haven't shown this to your kids yet or you haven't watched it yourself and you're wondering, all right, so I'm hearing a lot of stuff about messianic prophecies and all this kinds of stuff. It's set in a really odd world. There's a couple of things that the movie doesn't go in depth into explaining. The first is that there are no computers because in the first two chapters you hear about this war that they had with the computers, with the robots, and so they've destroyed all of that kind of technology. And so the computers are these humans that are called mentats. We see Thurfear in the beginning, who plays a much larger role in the story of the first book, so I'm hoping we're going to see more of him in part 2. Where they basically like roll their eyes into the back of their heads and make all these computations, and they've basically been turned into human computers. So we don't get a lot of backstory there. Maybe we will in part 2, but it's not necessary for everything that we're doing. We're also shown a lot about the Bene Gesserit religion, and our friend Ricky Pope from the Christian Nerds Unite podcast did a wonderful breakdown of Dune. But there is something that I do have a little disagreement with Ricky on. Ricky says he doesn't believe that the Bene Gesserits are something that were related to Catholicism. And the author of these books, Frank Herbert, knows a lot about world religions, and so he does kind of pick and choose some things. I would say as a parent or as a person who's a believer, instead of being cautious about showing this movie to your kids, use it as an opportunity to talk about some of that stuff and to say, they believe that Paul is the Messiah or that Paul is going to be, this sort of leader figure. Why is it that we do or don't believe that as we're looking within a Christian worldview? I think it's an awesome opportunity for that. However, the Bene Gesserits are an all-female order that follow a lot of the same sort of hierarchical things that you would see in the Catholic religion. But they are supposed to be, from what I understand now, a reflection of the Jesuits. So, which is the all-male Catholic order that, throughout history, people have speculated as to how really good their intentions are. They have to go and they have to teach places. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But the Bene Gesserits were supposed to be a reflection of the Jesuits, which is kind of where they got some of their name and stuff from. But that brings us to our last thing. If we're talking about, like, how do we view this movie, what are some things we should talk about? Nudity is always a big thing whenever we're talking about Hollywood cinema. There is no like frontal nudity or anything like that. There's two scenes.
You see a Bobo.
Yeah, there's two scenes that I will tell you that. There's one where you do see Duke Atreides where he's getting dressed and you see his rear, his full frame in the shot. And then there's another one, and this is where I want to get back to Baron Harkonnen, is it shows him naked from the side, but he's so big and the suit that he's got on has him so overweight that you really can't see anything. It's just like this girth of a man and rolls. Well, the actor...
It's like Peter Griffin in Family Guy. He can walk around without clothes.
So Stellan Skarsgård, who plays Baron Harkonnen, or Baron Harkonnen, he felt like that was the most intimidating that the character was.
When he was naked?
When he was naked, because it shows him as like a guy that has to have all these things to pull him up.
Is that the most intimidating that any man can be?
No, I don't think so at all. Which is why we're told to cover that shame over and over and over again, because that is not the case. But
cover your shame.
He continued to kind of fight for having the Baron nude more often, because they saw that scene and they were like, he was like, this is it. This is where he's the most intimidating, because I say he's the most intimidating. He's sort of the most vile and disgusting in that scene. And Skellen was like, we need more of him nude. And everybody else was like, no, we don't want to do that. The makeup artist didn't want to do it. The director didn't want to do it. Nobody wanted to do it. So overall, we'll use the same ranking system as the Tatooine Suns. But out of 10 sandworms, how many sandworms do you give Dune?
7.
7. Okay, so you're maybe a little harsher judge than I am. I'm going to give it 8, and with the caveat that it could be more, depending on how good Part 2 is.
That actually, I was about to say that.
Yeah, it all is kind of dependent upon Part 2.
There's a lot in the book.
Yeah.
That again, you're not going to be able to fit even into 2 movies, but I hope, and this is maybe the next topic, what are some things you want to see in Part 2? Obviously, we'll see the continuation of the story.
Right.
We left off with him with Paul and Jessica going to the Siege, or on their way to the Siege.
Yep.
Which is one of the Fremen strongholds.
Yeah.
But one thing that they did cut, and I'm not sure, and I'm wondering if they're going to put it in the book, in Part 2 of the movie, is Lady Jessica and Duke Leto's falling out that they had right before,
which was fake.
Yeah, but she didn't know it.
Correct. Yeah, she didn't know that it was all put on.
Yeah,
that's true.
So the Duke knew that they were coming for him.
The Duke nuked him.
Yeah, he knew they were coming for him. She's really struggling with, he didn't trust me. He's blaming this all on me. And not only that, but I forget his name, Hawir, the mentat that works for them.
Oh, Thurfear, yeah.
He thinks Lady Jessica was the traitor.
Right, he doesn't believe that it was Dr. Yue.
Yeah, we know it was the doctor, and we see that in the movie, but there's some deeper levels to that on who betrayed the family.
So here's what I need to know.
Okay.
Right, what will make or break Part 2 of this movie for you?
I don't think it's if they change directors, I think that could be troublesome. Because I liked how closely they stuck to the story. As long as Villeneuve, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Sure, yeah, don't even try it.
Yeah, okay.
The director is good.
I'm not sure what could really break it, other than not continuing in the path that they're on right now is good.
Yeah,
if they continue with that and they finish the movie strong as they did with the first part, I think it'll be good.
Okay.
What about you?
I think it's going to be how they handle the time gaps. Because where the movie cut, it ends with Paul killing Jamis, which should have been, if you were to go by the book, a much bigger buildup, like weeks long, or days long, not weeks long, but days long, to kind of build up this animosity between them so that you feel it a little bit more. You don't have that, but there are 2 significant time jumps after this. There's 2 different jumps of 2 years, and instead of stopping before the first jump of 2 years, they stopped before they get back to the siege. And by doing that, they're going to have to figure out a way to overcome these two different 2-year jumps. They've got a couple of characters that they have to introduce and build up as pretty evil in that time period. And so there's a lot of things at play because now the second movie has to cover a span of 6 years. And so how they handle those jumps in time, whether they do it all at once, whether they break it up, is going to let us see whether or not this movie is going to be streamlined or if it's going to be terribly convoluted because whether it was COVID restrictions or just their own artistic interpretation of when to stop the movie, they stopped it in a very pivotal point, but also in a really weird place to stop it because there's a piece, if you haven't read the books, I'm not going to give it away, but there is a piece. Up. Yeah, there's a piece that comes up in what would essentially just be a couple of weeks within the events happening in Dune as they are. That would be a wonderful stopping point, and they cut right before then. So now there's a lot of really significant things. And Frank Herbert didn't talk about much action in the wars and things like that, and so there's a lot of that they're just going to have to make up. They've got a lot of artistic license to be able to do some really cool things with the visual effects and with the wars that get started on Arrakis. But if they don't handle those two-year fast forwards really well, I think it has the potential to really blow stuff up in part 2 and to keep it from being what it could have been. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this. Remember to tune in on Thursday for our interview with the very funny Josh Phillips. He's not going to talk anything about Dune, but he has some absolutely hilarious stories to tell. He's not just a really funny guy, but a really good guy, too. And that was one of the cool things that kind of came across in the interview. So make sure that you tune in on Thursday. Thank you guys for watching. And are we going to, I guess we'll see you Thursday.
Yeah, coming up soon.
From the past.
Yeah, by the way, Nicole says that 7 is still pretty high, so Nicole was not a big fan of Dune.
7 is still pretty high?
Meaning 7 is...
I mean, if you're going by, like...
I guess it depends on the
D's get degrees, then yeah, 7's pretty high because it's a C. But I don't do that. And do they still do grades like that?
I don't know.
Well, in that case, I give you 1 unicorn for our first time trying this.
Good job.
Unicorn plus, or a P7.
Hey. See y'all later. Have a
We're
good one.
out. Have a good one.
Have a fantastic night, San Diego.